What if the most terrifying power in existence wasn't violence, money, or control, but clarity? The kind of seeing that strips away every comforting story you've ever told yourself. Because the moment you see reality as it truly is, everything you once believed begins to unravel. The people you love start to look different. The life you built starts to tremble, and the world which once felt solid begins to shimmer like a mirage. Most people don't fear darkness, they fear light. Because light exposes. It reveals how much of what we call life is theater. Roles we play, words we repeat, dreams we inherit without question. To awaken is not to become special, it's to become painfully real. And when you see clearly, you can't unsee. You can't return to the dream. You start to understand why truth has always been crucified, exiled, or ignored. Because seeing things as they are threatens everything built on illusion. So before we go any further, ask yourself, how much truth can you really handle? Because this isn't a story about becoming enlightened, it's a story about what happens when you finally open your eyes. We live inside a fog so thick we've forgotten it's there. Every day we mistake the hum of our own minds for the sound of life itself. We scroll, we click, we buy, we perform. We fill the silence with noise because we're terrified of what might emerge if it stopped. We call this progress, but it's really anesthesia, a soft humming trance that numbs us just enough to keep going. Most people don't see the world. They see a projection of their own hunger, fear, and memory. They think they're awake because their eyes are open, but they're moving through dreams that have been sold to them in advertisements and algorithms. Look around. Everyone is chasing something. The perfect job, the perfect body, the perfect version of themselves that will finally be enough. But the finish line keeps moving, always just out of reach. We wake up anxious, fall asleep restless, and call that living. The fog of thought wraps itself around every moment, whispering stories about who we are and what we must become. You aren't just a participant in this trance, you are its fuel. Each time you judge, compare, or crave, the fog thickens. Each time you seek meaning in the eyes of others, you sink deeper into the sleep. It's not evil, it's habit. We've been conditioned since childhood to confuse thought for truth, to obey the script, study, work, succeed, repeat, to measure worth in numbers, in attention, in applause. We build identities like skyscrapers, tall, impressive, and hollow inside, and we keep polishing the glass hoping no one notices the cracks. But somewhere deep down, you feel it, the quiet unease, the weightless ache of a life that looks full but feels empty. That is the first sign the trance is breaking. In America, we call it ambition, productivity, hustle. We celebrate exhaustion as virtue, distraction as connection. We post our happiness, edit our sadness, filter our existence until it glows just right. But behind every perfect smile lies a secret. No one really believes the performance. The fog is sustained by collective agreement. As long as everyone pretends the play is real, the illusion holds. But the moment one person sees through it, the spell begins to crack. Imagine standing in a crowd where everyone is staring at screens, and for a single second, you look up. You see the sunlight moving across the buildings, the air vibrating with quiet. For a breath, you realize how asleep you've been. And then, almost instantly, the mind rushes back in, checking, labeling, scrolling, escaping. Because clarity, even for a moment, is unbearable when you've built your world on distraction. The truth is, the trance offers safety. It gives you rules, goals, enemies, and a sense of control. It tells you who to be and what to want. But it also steals the one thing you were born with, the ability to see things as they are. Every institution, every system of belief depends on your willingness to stay half asleep. The fog must remain thick enough for you to forget that the cage was never locked. And yet, somewhere beneath the noise, there's a faint pull, the call of the real. You feel it when the music stops, when you catch your own reflection and don't recognize the eyes staring back. You feel it in those brief moments when silence slips through the cracks of your routine and you sense that life could be more than this endless repetition. That subtle unease is the doorway, but to step through it means risking everything the fog has given you: identity, belonging, certainty. So before we move further, pause. Not to think, but to listen. Beneath the fog, something ancient waits, still, patient, alive. It's the part of you that's never been hypnotized, the awareness untouched by stories or names. It has always been there, quietly watching you play your roles. The question is whether you're ready to hear it. Because once you do, the trance begins to crumble, and the world you thought you knew will never look the same again. When you begin to see through the fog, something unexpected happens. You start to lose the world you once belonged to. The conversations that excite you now feel hollow. The ambitions that once drove you begin to fade. You laugh at the same jokes, attend the same dinners, but somewhere behind your eyes, a quiet distance has formed. It isn't arrogance, it's clarity. You're no longer hypnotized by what others worship, and that makes you dangerous in a culture that feeds on shared delusion. Seeing clearly sounds like liberation, but it comes with a cost. The moment you stop pretending, you begin to threaten the script that keeps everyone comfortable. Friends who once admired your honesty start to avoid your gaze. They sense something unsettling in your calm, an absence of need, of approval. Your silence exposes what they're still trying to hide. People don't hate truth because it's false. They hate it because it's mirror-like. It reflects the parts they've spent a lifetime avoiding. The first stage of awakening is often grief. You grieve the loss of belonging, of easy laughter, of that comforting blindness you once called normal. You realize that most human connection is built not on truth, but on shared pretending. When you no longer play along, people feel betrayed. They'll call you detached, cynical, even cold. But it isn't detachment. It's seeing the strings that move the puppet show and realizing you can't dance to the same tune anymore. In modern life, this separation is subtle but relentless. At work, you begin to notice how people speak in code, phrases designed to conceal rather than reveal. Success becomes theater, confidence becomes armor, and truth is dressed up to look like marketing. The more you see, the harder it becomes to participate. You can play the game, but you know it's a game. You can smile, but you can't forget that the smile is often currency, traded for approval. In America, individuality is worshipped, but conformity hides underneath it. Everyone claims to think freely, but the moment your thoughts challenge the collective dream, you're labeled. Too quiet, too intense, too strange. The awakened learn that freedom doesn't make you popular, it makes you visible in a way that unsettles others. Because if you can't be manipulated by fear or flattery, you can't be controlled. And those who can't be controlled are always cast as outsiders. But the true price of seeing isn't social, it's internal. You begin to question everything you once anchored your identity to. The roles, the beliefs, the promises you made to yourself. The world starts to feel both vast and empty. You may go through days where joy feels thin, as if the old flavors of life have disappeared. It's not depression, it's detox. You're withdrawing from illusion, and like any addiction, clarity burns before it heals. There's a moment when you realize no one is coming to understand you. The path of seeing is solitary, not because others can't walk beside you, but because each person must see for themselves. No philosophy, no religion, no movement can carry you across. Only silence can. And in that silence, you'll feel both the ache of loneliness and the beauty of liberation. You'll understand that to be awake in a sleeping world is to love without being recognized, to care without control, to walk without applause. Still, there is a strange grace in this exile. The further you drift from the collective dream, the more you discover a deeper intimacy with life itself. You begin to see beauty in what others overlook, the slow movement of light, the breath between words, the truth hiding inside imperfection. This is the paradox. The more alone you become, the more connected you feel. But the journey doesn't end here. Seeing isn't the destination. It's the death of the illusion that there ever was one. The next step isn't about escaping the world. It's about dissolving the self that stands apart from it. Because beyond the ache of separation lies something vast, silent, and alive. And once you touch it, everything you thought you lost begins to return in a new form, no longer as possession, but as presence. There comes a moment when the mirror of your mind shatters, and for the first time you see that the person you've been protecting, defending, and improving was never real. The collapse doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes quietly, like the sound of glass cracking in another room. It's the slow unraveling of everything you've ever called me. You watch your thoughts move, your emotions surge, your memories replay, and something inside you realizes none of it belongs to you. The I you've spent your whole life serving is just a collection of stories pretending to be a center. And when that illusion begins to fade, the silence that follows can feel both terrifying and holy. We're taught that losing yourself is tragedy, that identity is sacred. But awakening reveals that the self we cling to is the true prison. Every role we play, lover, achiever, victim, believer, is a mask designed to keep us from facing the vastness underneath. When the mask falls away, the mind panics. It screams for something to hold on to, a new belief, a new identity, anything to restore the illusion of control. But there is no going back. Once the center collapses, you can't rebuild it without knowing it's fiction. This death is not violent, it's more like surrender. You begin to notice how every impulse to control life comes from fear. You see how thought rushes to define experience, to claim it, to make it yours. And then one day you stop. A sound arises, a breeze passes, a thought appears, and you let it all be. For the first time, you are not the one thinking, feeling, or reacting. You are simply the space in which it all happens. The I doesn't die because it's killed, it dies because it's seen through. From the outside, nothing changes. You still speak, work, laugh, love, but inside, there's a shift so profound it defies language. The one who used to strive is gone. The one who needed to win, to prove, to be right, to be special. That voice fades into distance. What remains is quiet awareness, like the sky after a storm. And in that stillness, life flows without resistance. Decisions make themselves. Words arise and dissolve. The world no longer revolves around you because there is no longer a you to revolve around. For most, this emptiness is unbearable. The mind calls it death because from its perspective, it is. But stay long enough in that stillness, and the emptiness begins to feel alive. You start to sense a subtle intelligence pulsing through every moment, a rhythm that doesn't belong to you, yet moves through you. You realize that what you called your life was never personal. Existence has always been happening by itself. You were just mistaken for the witness, when in truth, you were the witnessing all along. This is the quiet revolution. Not the destruction of self, but the recognition that the self was never more than a thought pretending to be eternal. It's a strange freedom, weightless, formless, beyond achievement. You don't gain anything from awakening. You lose everything that was never real. The search for meaning ends, not because you find an answer, but because you no longer need the question. Life simply is. And yet this death is not the end, it is the threshold. Because once the self dissolves, what remains isn't absence, it's presence. A vast, open awareness that embraces everything, even the illusion it once believed in. You see that love doesn't belong to a person, it's the nature of what you are. Peace isn't something you create, it's what appears when the one who is struggling disappears. To die before you die is the rarest freedom. The ego fears it, but the soul has been waiting for it all along. And when it finally happens, when the I collapses into silence, you don't vanish, you expand. You realize that what you thought was you was never more than a ripple in the ocean. The ocean remains, infinite and still, watching its own waves dissolve into light. And from that stillness, a new seeing begins to rise, one that no longer divides the world into self and other, life and death, truth and illusion. What's left is only this vast awareness, breathing through everything, quietly alive, quietly free. When the illusion of self dissolves, the world itself begins to change. The veil that once blurred your vision lifts, and you see what has always been there, the architecture of human belief, the invisible threads that bind society together. At first, it's dizzying. What you thought was solid starts to shimmer, and what you once ignored now feels alive. The stage lights dim, and you catch a glimpse behind the curtain. The actors are the audience, the script is improvised, and the show only continues because no one dares to stop clapping. Seeing clearly isn't about discovering secret knowledge. It's about recognizing how deeply we mistake stories for truth. You begin to notice that everything people defend so passionately, money, nationality, religion, success, is made of words and collective agreement. The value of a dollar, the sanctity of a border, the righteousness of a belief, all of it is held together by faith, not fact. You see how society operates like a dream we keep renewing each morning, because waking up would mean facing the terrifying freedom of not knowing. But this seeing doesn't make you cynical, it makes you tender. You understand why people cling to their illusions, because reality, when stripped bare, is vast and uncertain. It's easier to worship symbols than to stand before the unknown. You watch the world trying to anchor itself in stories, governments enforcing order, religions promising meaning, corporations selling happiness, and you feel both sorrow and compassion. No one is to blame. The dream was beautiful while it lasted. Once you see through it, you can no longer play the game in the same way. You might still earn money, follow laws, speak of nations and faith, but you do it lightly as one moves through a play knowing it's theater. The awakened person participates but is no longer hypnotized. They see that the rules are tools, not truths. They can use them without worshiping them. To the world, this looks like detachment. But it isn't indifference, it's clarity. In this clarity, freedom emerges. You realize that everything is temporary: power, fame, pain, joy, even identity itself. And yet, within this impermanence, there's a strange peace. The world no longer needs to be perfect to be sacred. The chaos, the contradiction, the constant change, these are not flaws in the design. They are the design. You stop asking the universe for meaning and start listening to its silence. In that silence, you discover something profound. The world has never been hiding anything from you. It's been revealing itself all along. You just weren't looking. Seeing through illusion doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring differently. You see a beggar and a billionaire as two expressions of the same human hunger. You see politics not as a battle of good and evil, but as the play of fear and desire repeating itself through history. You understand that every war begins in the mind, every system of control is sustained by collective fear, and every revolution without inner transformation eventually rebuilds the same cage. You no longer fight the dream, you simply stop believing in its permanence. And yet the most shocking part of clear seeing is this: nothing actually changes. The streets are still crowded, the world still hums with ambition and noise. The difference lies in the gaze. You are no longer trapped inside the story. You move through the same world others do, but for you, it has become transparent. The illusion hasn't vanished, it has softened, become light, almost playful. You can laugh again, not because you're blind, but because you finally understand the joke. This is the great seeing. Not the end of illusion, but the end of being deceived by it. You walk through the marketplace, the church, the courtroom, the city streets, and everywhere you look, you see the divine playing hide and seek with itself. You see that the same awareness looking through your eyes is looking through theirs. And when you realize that, the distance between you, and them dissolves. What's left is not enlightenment, but intimacy. The quiet knowing that behind the curtain of every belief, every fear, every name, there has always been only one thing watching, dreaming, and remembering itself through the eyes of the world. After the curtain falls and the dream dissolves, what remains is not glory or enlightenment, it is stillness. A quiet so profound that at first it feels like loss. The mind, addicted to motion, panics in this silence. It searches for meaning, for a next step, for a higher state to achieve. But there is none. The game of becoming ends here. What unfolds now is not about conquering life, but allowing it. Stillness does not mean withdrawal. It means intimacy with what is. It is not the absence of movement, but the end of resistance. You no longer fight the flow. You are the flow. This is where the awakened person begins to live again, but differently. Not driven by fear or ambition, not trying to fix or prove anything. There is a softness to their presence, as if they move through life without leaving ripples. They don't seek to change others or save the world, yet their calm becomes contagious. In a culture that celebrates loudness, speed, and certainty, stillness is subversive. It quietly dismantles everything built on noise. To be still in this world is to hold power without domination, to see clearly without judgment, to act without attachment. You begin to notice that true influence is not in control, but in clarity. When you are no longer enslaved by thought, emotion, or ideology, you become untouchable. Not through defense, but through transparency. Like water, you yield, yet nothing can break you. You can enter any form, any situation, and remain yourself. Because yourself is no longer a fixed idea, it is awareness itself. There is a tenderness that grows from this seeing. You stop dividing the world into enemies and allies. You begin to understand that everyone is walking through the same dream, each doing their best to wake up in their own way. Compassion ceases to be moral duty and becomes natural response. You no longer help others to feel superior, but because suffering anywhere is felt everywhere. This is the quiet revolution, the power of gentleness in a violent age. The awakened no longer argue with reality. They allow pain to pass through without clinging, joy to appear without grasping. They meet life as it is, not as they wish it to be. And in that acceptance, paradoxically, they become capable of real change. Because only the one who is not at war with what is can act with wisdom. Action born of stillness is precise, effortless, and kind. It is not reaction, it is response. In America, where success is often measured by volume, more wealth, more visibility, more certainty, the return to stillness feels radical. It contradicts every story of achievement and self-improvement. But when you live without the constant hum of needing to be someone, something opens. You rediscover the beauty in small things, the way light moves across a room, the sound of wind through leaves, the pause before speech. Life becomes simple again, not because it's easy, but because it's enough. This stillness is not passive. It is alive, awake, alert. It listens more than it speaks. It feels the world without rushing to interpret it. From this place, creation flows naturally, as breath follows breath. You no longer seek meaning, you live it. You no longer chase peace, you are peace, even in the midst of chaos. And perhaps this is the quiet irony of awakening. After all the searching, all the breaking, all the loss, you find yourself exactly where you started, here, now. But everything has changed because for the first time, you are truly present. The fog has lifted, the self has fallen silent, and life, just as it is, becomes sacred again. This is the soft power of seeing, not to escape the world, but to return to it, with eyes wide open, heart unguarded, and the gentle knowing that nothing real can ever be lost. In the end, awakening is not a story of triumph. It is a quiet remembrance of what was never lost. When all the illusions fade, when even the idea of enlightenment dissolves, what remains is something so simple that it almost goes unnoticed. It is the awareness that has always been watching, silently present through every rise and fall, every joy and sorrow, every birth and death of identity. You realize that this awareness has never been damaged, never been improved, never been separate from anything. It has no beginning, no end, and no name. It is not yours. It is you. To live from this knowing is not to escape the world, but to walk through it with open eyes. You no longer need to protect yourself because nothing real can be taken from you. The opinions of others, the shifting tides of success and failure, the noise of the world, they still move around you, but they no longer move you. You've stopped confusing movement with meaning. You've stopped chasing permanence in what was always changing. And in that stillness, you discover a strange and tender freedom, the ability to love everything without needing to hold on to anything. The people around you may still be searching for answers, for belonging, for salvation, but you see them differently now. You see the divine play unfolding through every confusion and every heartbreak. You see that even the ones who resist awakening are part of its rhythm. You no longer judge them because you remember what it felt like to sleep, to ache, to fear the truth. Compassion becomes your second nature, not as virtue, but as recognition. You see yourself in every lost face, every desperate gesture, and you realize that the entire human story, with all its chaos and beauty, has always been a single movement of consciousness trying to remember itself. When the awakened return to the world, they do not arrive with halos or wisdom to preach. They arrive with silence in their eyes and gentleness in their hands. They laugh more easily. They listen more deeply. They find beauty in imperfection, divinity in the mundane. They understand that nothing needs to be fixed, only seen. The war between what is and what should be has ended, and from that peace, life begins to flow again, not as a duty, but as a dance. You begin to notice that life doesn't demand anything from you. It simply invites you to participate, to breathe, to feel, to be. The mind once believed that awareness was a state to reach, but now you see it's what has been here all along, patiently waiting for you to stop running. When you look back, you realize that nothing was wasted. Every fear, every illusion, every mistake was part of the unfolding. Even the years spent asleep were necessary, for without the dream, the awakening could not be recognized. And so you stop dividing life into sacred and ordinary. Everything becomes holy. The sound of rain, the hum of traffic, the laughter of strangers, all of it belongs. The awakened don't live above the world, they live within it, tenderly. They don't avoid suffering, but they no longer suffer from suffering. They move through life like wind through trees, present, invisible, free. In the quiet of this realization, one truth remains. You were never separate, never broken, never incomplete. The search ends not in discovery, but in remembrance. What you sought was never hidden, it was only overlooked. What can be lost will always be lost, and what is real was never in danger. That is the paradox and the peace. And perhaps that is the final gift of awakening, not a new self, but the end of needing one. You no longer stand apart from life, measuring, grasping, naming. You dissolve into the moment like light into water. The world continues as before, its noise, its striving, its dreams. But now you walk through it untouched, anchored in something beyond time. That which can be destroyed was never truly you. That which remains, that silent, radiant awareness, was never born and therefore can never die. The mirror does not disappear when the dream ends. It only becomes clear. What once reflected your fears and ambitions now reflects something timeless, something that was watching even as you slept. The world goes on spinning its stories, and you walk among them quietly, knowing they're all made of the same light. You no longer search for meaning, you embody it. The mirror no longer shows a self striving to become, it shows life seeing itself, endlessly creating, endlessly dissolving. To see this clearly is not to withdraw, but to love more deeply, to live without walls. And as this story fades into silence, remember, awakening isn't about escaping the world, but returning to it with open eyes. If this journey spoke to something in you, if it stirred that quiet place that is always known, let it continue. Leave a like, share this reflection, and subscribe for more stories that remind you of what was never lost. The world needs those who can see, and perhaps you've already begun to.